internet friends! I have something to read to you, and I want you to see if you could figure out what it is. This is an anecdote explaining the manner in which my way of life was rotated along a y-axis until it reached a position roughly 180 degrees from that which it started. If I could have 60 seconds of your time, simply place your posterior in the selected location, and I will relate to you the details of how I was made the male monarch of the district of the city of Los Angeles, California, located at coordinates 34.08333, 118.44778. You know what that is? Anybody? Now this is the story all about how my life got flipped, turned upside down, and I'd like to take a minute, just sit right there, I'll tell you how I became the prince of a town called Bel-Air. What I read to you was the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air theme song. What was the problem with it? It was written in completely the wrong register. Register is a term we use a lot in translation, and it refers to the way a text is written in terms of the vocabulary it uses and the level of difficulty there is to understanding the text. Even if you didn't already know the term register, I'm sure you've been exposed to texts of really different registers. Think of the way a children's book about the moon is written versus the way a scientific paper written by somebody at NASA about the moon would be written. That's a really big difference in register. A low register text is going to use very simple vocabulary. It's going to be very easy for anybody to understand. It's not going to take a lot of education or prior knowledge of the subject that you're discussing to understand it. Whereas a text that's written in a really high register is going to be very complex. It's going to use difficult vocabulary, and that vocabulary probably won't be explained. You're going to have to be highly educated or have a really thorough knowledge of the subject area in order to understand it. And between those two extremes, you've got all kinds of different registers in there. Or if you're writing about something in a particular field, something about astronomy or about fashion design or whatever, if you're writing about that for a beginner, somebody who's not familiar with that subject area, you're going to have to use a low register. You're going to have to use simple terms, or if you use complex terms, you're going to have to explain them. You're going to want to make sure everything is really, really clear. But if you're writing something for an expert in that field, you don't want to insult their intelligence by explaining every little term that they probably already know. You're going to go ahead and drop those difficult vocabulary in there just like it's nothing. Another thing to consider when you are writing a text and dealing with register is the level of education of your intended audience. If you're writing something for middle school students, you're going to use inherently a different style of writing, a different set of vocabulary and ways of explaining things than you are for somebody who's working on their master's degree. And another piece of the register puzzle is how complex your sentences are. If you're writing an instruction manual, people are probably going to be looking at that quickly. They want to figure out what they need to know and then get on with whatever they're doing. So you're going to want to use short, simple, clear sentences. Whereas if you're writing a novel or a critical abstract or something, you're probably going to want to use a lot more complex sentence structures and varied length of sentences and all kinds of things like that. When you are reading texts in the future, whether it's a comic book or an instruction manual or a scientific paper, think about the register in which it's written and think to yourself, is this an appropriate register for the audience of this text? And let me know in the comments if you have ever seen a text that was written in the entirely wrong register for the people it was trying to reach, because that happens sometimes, and obviously that's not a good thing when that does happen. We really want to avoid that as translators or writers or anybody dealing with words and communicating information. My adventure this week was cleaning out my room and some boxes in the attic at my parents' house last week. I discovered a lot of things that I hadn't seen in a long time, including a whole bunch of stuffed animals and Beanie Babies that have been boxed up in the attic for ages. Went through there and discovered some friends from my childhood that I didn't necessarily remember. And probably my favorite part was going through a box of Beanie Babies and I found the walrus. And I was looking at some of their names because some of the Beanie Babies I actually remembered their names even though I hadn't seen them in years, but I couldn't remember the walrus's name. I looked at his little tag and it said Paul. The walrus was Paul, you guys. Little inside jokes like that the kids playing with the Beanie Babies probably won't get, but their parents absolutely will get, make life totally worth the pineapple. Hope you're having a great week and I'll see you later. In West Philadelphia, born and raised, on the playground was where I spent most of my days, chilling out, maxing, relaxing all cool and all, shooting some b-ball outside of the school when a couple of guys who were up to no good started making trouble in my neighborhood. I got in one little fight and my mom got scared. She said, "You moving with your auntie and uncle in Bel-Air."